For more on this, we are joined by Sahar Razavi, Director of the Iranian and Middle Eastern Studies Center and Associate Professor of Political Science at California State University. Thank you, Sahar. Welcome to Asiaonenews. So, Professor Razavi, how does Tehran view the new Pakistan-Saudi Arabia-Türkiye Defense Pact? So does Iran see it as a security concern or primarily a political message, do you think?
I think it's both. Hi, thanks for having me on. It's good to be with you. I think this is exactly the kind of step that Iran would have needed in order to see the kinds of shifts that it aims for in the long term. This kind of security pact is one of several measures that Iran has been working on in order to try to secure some kind of a regional stability where it's not as vulnerable to future attack by the United States and Israel as it has been up until now.
And Iranian officials say Saudi Arabia cannot achieve lasting security through military alliances. So what alternative security approach is Tehran advocating for the Gulf?
Well, at the outset, we know that Iran's government has consistently demanded that the United States military withdraw from the region. So you can see in kind of reading between the lines and a lot of its messaging about this security pact, specifically with respect to the Arab Gulf states, that there are many different reasons, most prominent of which is that it is they're using religious framing and religious language to say that the United States military doesn't belong in Muslim lands, essentially. But this framing is really about their own pragmatic security interests. They want the United States to withdraw militarily from the region, and they are promising that if that happens, that the security can be guaranteed in that way, and not the way that it has been up until now for those Gulf states, which is that they've essentially signed over some of their autonomy and sovereignty to the United States in exchange for security guarantees. And one of the reasons Iran has been undermining their security up until now during the prosecution of this war is to show them that it is not fruitful ultimately for them to rely on the United States for security or economic prosperity, and to encourage them to shift a little bit more toward regional security processes like this one.
And Iran is reviewing legislation that could essentially restrict US and Israeli vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. So if implemented, how significant do you think would that be for regional stability and global trade?
Very significant. The United States is trying to avoid such an arrangement at all costs. Any agreement, basically the United States is saying you and Oman can agree to whatever you want, but as long as we have a naval blockade on the ports, then it doesn't matter what agreement you come up with. Right now, this agreement that Iran and Oman have been crafting essentially has incoming ships going closer to the Iranian side and outgoing ships going closer to the Omani side. And in this way, there's not only a division of labor, but they're trying to structure the fee system for transit by framing it as basically navigation assistance and accompaniment through what could be otherwise not very secure waters on the way in, and then on the way out, similar but different framing. So what they're trying to do right now is, I think, move toward more of a Bosphorus model, and there is some daylight between what they have now and how the Bosphorus functions in Turkey, but I think that's ultimately the kind of framing that they are aiming for, so that they can legitimize their lasting control of the strait.
And Saudi Arabia says that Iranian-backed militias and Houthis are probably planning another attack. So while Iran denies destabilizing the region, so how serious is the risk of another major regional escalation, do you think?
At this point, I do still think that the risk is high for an escalation, either from the United States or from its allies like Saudi Arabia. We know the United States was weighing the option of a ground invasion a few months ago. I think that is still on the table. We know that there are also more potent weapons that can be used. Uh, the pressure is mounting, and deliberately so on the part of Iran. They know that strategically they're in a very strong position, given that, if the United States could have opened the strait by force, by now it would have. Iran knows that it can't, that the United States can't do that. Iran also knows that the US midterm elections are getting closer and closer, and that pressures Donald Trump and his administration more and in a very intensifying kind of exponential way right now. It incentivizes the Trump administration to make a deal that ends the war and brings prices down, brings stability. And so right now, Iran is benefiting more from the prolonging of this war than the United States is. And they're going to use that as much to their advantage as they can.
And so with defense alliances expanding and Houthi attacks intensifying and tensions over the Strait of Hormuz growing, so do you see the region moving toward confrontation? Or is there still room for meaningful diplomacy, do you think?
I do think there's still room for meaningful diplomacy. I think regional escalation is still a possibility, but the appetite for this war across the Gulf, the GCC states, and in the West, the appetite for this war is really very low, and in Iran as well, at least for the domestic population. Although, as I said, the government is prepared for this war of attrition for quite some time. But given the appetite for war is low, and the Iranian government has been very explicitly and deliberately messaging in Arabic to the GCC states in ways that are intended to create a wedge between the population and their government. And they want to use that wedge to pressure the governments to kind of pull back from the United States and shift toward, again, regional partners. This goal, for me, it ultimately reflects this broader possibility of, yes, regional escalation is absolutely a possibility. But another really serious possibility is that there will be shifting of alliances and possibly a realignment politically in the region, such that the United States, now that its kind of the facade of invincibility has been punctured, the US would play a less dominant role in the region, and regional partners within the Middle East and North Africa and South Asia would have much stronger relationships than they did before. So diplomacy is absolutely possible, and I think at this point, the threat of escalation and Iran's preparedness to prolong the war are being used as levers to pressure for diplomacy. I think that's the goal ultimately.
Thanks, Sahar, for joining us indeed.